is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So it's obviously trade deadline week. There's a bunch of deals going down, but it's also Thursday. And if you've been following this page for a while, you know that on Thursdays, we do our weekly redraft. So I'm not rescheduling it. I'm not pushing it back a week, missing this week. We're doing it, even though we are less than 24 hours from the deadline. I'm sure like a Jake Gensel trade's going to go down or something in the next 15 minutes while I'm filming this. But we have the 2012 draft. We've done 2020 all the way down to 2013. So now we are looking at the 2012 draft. Now, this draft initially kind of bustville, kind of bust central. Yakupov, Murray, Galchenyuk, Reinhart, top four might be the worst, probably is the worst top four. Without a doubt is the worst top four in the entire NHL. When looking at this, not to spoil, but there's really only three guys that can have an argument to be in this redraft top 10. I'm not going to tell you if all three make it in, but there's 7 guys that are not even close to sniffing this potential redraft. This is more so, there's a lot of goalies in this draft. Obviously, goalies usually don't go top 10. So in looking at this, at the first overall spot, Nail Yakupov obviously went to the Edmonton Oilers. It's between Hellebuyck and Vasilevsky. Last year, this time, I would say Vasilevsky pretty easily. 2 years ago, would definitely say Vasilevsky, but I think in the year of 2024, spring of 2024, I'm actually going to go with Connor Hellebuyck. I don't think this is recency biased. You look at their overall, I'm basically just going to talk about Hellebuyck and Vasilevsky at this point. Vasilevsky's obviously second instead of Ryan Murray to the Columbus Blue Jackets. I'm not shocking anybody with that. But when looking at Hellebuyck versus Vasilevsky, career-wise, Hellebuyck 200 wins. That'd be insane. 267 wins, 167 losses, 40 OT or shootout losses, 917 save percentage, 2.62 goals against. Vasilevsky 284 wins, so slightly more wins, 17 more wins, but obviously he plays on a better team. 138 losses, like around 30 less losses, 29 OT and shootout losses, a 917 as well with a 2.52. So when looking at it, same save percentage, almost same goals against. Hellebuyck clearly on worse teams, and especially this year, it is so drastic in terms of Hellebuyck probably going to win his second Vezina Trophy with a 922 save percentage while playing like 75% of his games, versus Vasilevsky has just not looked the same post pretty serious injury, serious surgery. He has an 896. When looking at Hellebuyck, he's lowest of his career in terms of save percentage is a 910, and that was on an 89-point Winnipeg team. That's better than even what Vasilevsky's team is this year. So yeah, this year, again, it's not solely this year. Vasilevsky has been fantastic, especially in the playoffs, but even in the playoffs, Hellebuyck's also been very good. He has a 916. Vasilevsky has a 921. I think people are going to think this is ridiculous because Vasilevsky has those 2 Stanley Cups, has that Conn Smythe, but I think we can agree if Hellebuyck is on the Lightning, they definitely win, most likely in 2021. Probably in 2020 as well. No, actually, definitely in 2020, probably in 2021 as well. Vasilevsky was just on the far better team, and I think going forward, even just not this year, the last 3 seasons, Hellebuyck has a 917, Vasilevsky only has a 912. So when looking at this, I do think Hellebuyck going forward, he's more of the workhorse overall, and he's aging better right now, has not had that massive injury like Vasilevsky has right now. They're both surefire Hall of Famers, in my opinion. They both have a good chance to end up top 10 goalies of all time. I'm not trying to shade Vasilevsky, but I think especially when looking at an Edmonton Oilers team that definitely has been contending at a high level the last 3 years compared to the prior 3 or 4 years where Hellebuyck has been the far better goalie and will probably be the better goalie going forward based on what we're seeing this season as well as the prior 2 seasons. I am going to go with Connor Hellebuyck. I know that might be ridiculous, but Connor Hellebuyck first overall to the Edmonton Oilers, which obviously means Vasilevsky, no doubt, again, surefire Hall of Famer, future probably top 10 goalie of all time, goes to Columbus Blue Jackets. They basically get their successor for Sergei Bobrovsky, go from one Hall of Fame Russian goalie to then another Russian Hall of Fame goalie. It's not a doubt. It falls off pretty substantially at 3rd overall. It's Hellebuyck, Vasilevsky, big tier down to 3rd overall, where Galchenyuk initially went to the Canadiens. I have them going with Philip Forsberg. The Canadiens badly needed that star forward from like 2015 to basically 2021, 2022. Carey Price was kind of just didn't have the offense in order to go deep in the playoffs. So when looking at a Philip Forsberg, although he was never 90, 100-point guy, he's been a very, very good first liner for most of his career, and especially good of late. You look back in 2015, if they have Forsberg instead of Galchenyuk, Forsberg right out of the rip was a 26-goal, 37 assists, 63-point guy in his first full season in 2015. That would have been second in points on the Montreal Canadiens, second in goals. Maybe they end up going deeper in the playoffs then, as well as the fact, especially as I mentioned before, recently he's playing out of his mind. 42 goals and 40 assists for 82 points back 2 years ago in 69 games, as well as this year, 30 goals, 34 assists, 64 points in 63 games. So although I think the guy that I have at fourth, you can definitely make an argument is better. I think for the Montreal Canadiens, considering when they were competitive from 2015 to 2020, they had Subban or Weber. So when looking at it, I think they needed that star forward more than, say, just another defenseman. So that's why I go with Philip Forsberg at this spot. At number 4, again, this is another very close one. 1 and 2 is close. 3 and 4 is very close. But I have the Islanders instead of Griffin Reinhart, which ended up being a fine pick considering they traded him for the pick that became Matt Barzal. I have them taking Jacob Slavin now. When looking at the Islanders, they get that number 1 defenseman that they were kind of lacking with the John Tavares, Brock Nelson, Anders Lee, Josh Bailey core for the most part. They had a bunch of good forwards, but they had to rely on Nick Leddy and Johnny Boychuk as their top pair who worked good together, but getting a guy like Slavin from 2015 to 2020 and honestly beyond when they were a good team, that would have been absolutely massive. He walked into the NHL, immediately played 21 minutes a night, had like 25 points. Then from beyond there, he was a 23 point a night guy, fluctuating between 30 to 40 points, getting Norris votes, I think, every single year for the most part. Of the past 8 years, he's been a legit top 10 to 20 defenseman, in my opinion. He maybe doesn't have that offensive upside, but when you look at how well he would have fit in a Barry Trotz system eventually, I think Slavin on the Islanders would have been absolutely fantastic. At 5th overall, the Leafs initially took Morgan Rielly. I have them taking Tomas Hertl now. They get their key forward, and they didn't have William Nylander. They didn't have Marner. They didn't have Matthews yet. And if we're going in this redraft universe, they end up not getting those guys. Those guys end up going higher. So in looking at this, they do get their future, maybe not franchise center, but a very good, very, very good second line center, low end first line center. I feel like Hertl is being slept on a little bit just because the Sharks suck, and he's still putting up like 55-ish point pace. But from 2018 to 2023, even last season included, he was around the 70-ish point guy with 280 points in 336 games. He's a very, very good player, kind of an underappreciated player considering the last 3 to 4 years, which were some of his prime years. The San Jose Sharks were just absolutely tanking. So I think the Leafs get Hertl. I do think that he is a better player than Morgan Rielly. Morgan Rielly's going to be later in this redraft. He's definitely in this redraft, but I think Hertl, in terms of value and especially positional value as a center, would be better for the Leafs. If you apply the further context, I haven't really done in a lot of these, I think it does maybe make sense to go Morgan Rielly, but considering we're not factoring in years later, if they drafted Marner, Nylander, and Matthews before this pick, then yeah, you'd go with Morgan Rielly, you'd go with the defenseman or another defenseman I'm going to get to, but I think given the back that this was the first pick of their kind of rebuild, Hertl is the pick here. At 6th overall, the Ducks initially took Hampus Lindholm. I have them taking Hampus Lindholm. When looking at Hampus Lindholm, he was very good right out of the rip. The Ducks were a high-level contender from basically since he joined the team in 2013, 2014, up until 2017. He was a top pair guy playing 22 to 23 minutes. So I think it makes sense. I think he was more well-rounded as a defenseman than, say, Morgan Rielly. So it's similarly to how in 2014, I had Ekblad at 10th overall, even though I think guys like Ehlers and Fiala are going to have better overall careers. For the Ducks, it makes sense for them to go with the more immediate impact, good two-way guy versus Rielly that kind of took a while to figure it out, especially defense. He's still kind of bad defensively, but especially bad defensively back then. So I think Lindholm, who's still a good player, last year finished 4th in the goddamn Norris, obviously on the Boston Bruins, having a little bit of a step back this year, especially offensively, only like 19 points in 56 games. I think the Ducks go with Lindholm here, and you can make an argument that maybe even the Leafs go with Lindholm at 5th overall, and I would probably hear you out. At 7th overall, the Wild initially took Matt Dumba. This is where Morgan Rielly goes. Morgan Rielly, obviously very good offensive defenseman. I think the Wild could have used a guy like him. They've kind of been, especially in the mid-2010s to late 2010s, even before Kirill Kaprizov, basically, they were a pretty boring team. They were very good defensively, but kind of lacked offensive creativity, especially from the blue line. So when looking at Morgan Rielly, having him come in, maybe pair with a Jared Spurgeon, I think that would have been very good. Would have given him a three-headed monster of Spurgeon, Brodin, and Rielly. So that would have been very good going forward. So I think the Wild get more so an offensive defenseman to kind of flare them up, and maybe they go on a couple deep runs in the late 2010s with a Morgan Rielly, the offensive firepower. The guy scored 68 points and 72 points in his career. He's a good offensive defenseman, not the best defensively. When TJ Brodie was at his heights, he kind of did help mask some of Rielly's defensive deficiencies. So I think Spurgeon kind of could have done the same for Rielly. At 8th overall, the Penguins initially went with Derek Pouliot. we got to taking Tavo. I got it right the first time. Tavo Teravainen. Jesus. So the Penguins just get even more forward depth. There's not really another defenseman. I don't think they would go with like a Trouba here. Teravainen off the rip in 2016 when the Penguins obviously won the Stanley Cup was a half a point per game. Very good guy by then. And then basically from the 2017-2018 season up until 2022 had 283 points in 333 games. So around 70-point pace. Similarly to a Hurdle, but he was a winger, and obviously Carolina's been good throughout basically all of that. So when looking at him on the Penguins, I think with him still definitely win even more in 2016 and 2017 compared to Pouliot, who's just a net negative and bad. And when looking at it, maybe in 2018, 2019, when he's a 70-ish point guy, having that forward depth, it maybe could have worked for the Penguins, and they end up going on another deep run in the playoffs. At 9th overall, the Jets initially took Jacob Trouba. I've been taking Freddie Anderson. Obviously, because of this redraft, they don't have Connor Hellebuck anymore. They need that goaltender, especially in the late 2010s when they were a pretty decent team into the early 2020s. So they get a guy like Freddie Anderson, who, although definitely benefited from playing on the Ducks, the Leafs, and the Hurricanes, who were all very good teams when he was on there, he still has an insane track record. When looking at him, he has 286 wins all time. Yes, wins is a team stat, but that is still insane. That's like 46th all time. And with the Jets, with this pick, Anderson actually in this draft was 22 years old. He re-entered the draft. So he was kind of ready to go right out of the rip for the Winnipeg Jets. And for an 8-year period, he was around a top 8 to 12 goalie. He was never really knocking down. I don't think he ever finished as a finalist for the Vezina, but most years got Vezina votes, was solid, was hovering between a 9-10 and a 9-18. So yes, which was on good teams, but we're looking at it now. Goalies on good teams, some of them are like 900, 895 at this goddamn point. So Freddie Anderson was a very good goaltender, and it makes sense for the Winnipeg Jets. They get their guy, although he has dealt with blood clots recently. Again, very good goalie from around 2015 to 2022. They get their starting goalie. And then lastly, Tampa Bay. Originally, they took Slater Cuckoo. I'm taking Linus Ullmark, another goalie. Goddamn 4 goalies in this top 10. But similarly to Hellebuck, they don't have Vasilevsky now in this redraft. So they end up getting Ullmark. Ullmark was very good, even the seasons that Tampa won the Stanley Cup in 2020 and 2021. He had a 915 and a 917 in Buffalo. So maybe if he did get hurt a decent amount, though. He was kind of like an injured guy for the most part. He missed like multiple weeks at times in those seasons. So he didn't play a ton of games those seasons. So the stats maybe are a little bit inflated from hot streaks. But on a Tampa Bay team, he probably would have been a very good starter. They could have potentially won Stanley Cups as well. When looking at it, he is the best potential goalie in this redraft for them at this point. I guess they could go with Matt Murray, but he just fell off so hard. Versus Ullmark, looks like he can be a solid starter, especially going forward. He had a 917 his first season in Boston, 938, won the goddamn Vezina last year, and this year a solid 908. Should be a solid, at the bare minimum, 1B for the next 3 to 4 years, and they get their goalie. Now, in terms of honorable mentions, Adam Pelech almost made it. Just the fact that the final 2 teams in this needed goalies, I ended up going with them. Frank Vetrano didn't get drafted in this draft, so he definitely would be a top 15 guy now, especially with his play of late. Tom Wilson, Shane Gothisbehere, Matt Murray again, but just fell off so rapidly. Jacob Trouba, a little bit overhated just because of that contract. Chandler Stevenson, Mike Matheson came on a little bit too late. Colton Parayko, and that's it. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? Here's the final: Connor Hellebuck, Vasilevsky, Forsberg, Slavin, Hurdle, Lindholm, Riley, Teravainen, Anderson, and Ullmark. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? I think my phone has been buzzing throughout this video. There's probably been a trade or something. I'll be seeing you in the next one, which might be in like 30 minutes.